Hi, this is Russell Glasser, host of The Atheist Experience. You know, The Atheist Experience is made possible by volunteers and the generous support of viewers like you. If the promotion of positive atheist culture and separation of church and state are values that you hold, please consider contributing by becoming an ACA member or visiting our product page at evolvefish.com under the Partner tab. Thank you.
And so we're live. It's so weird to not like have the music or anything else going right now.
Yeah.
Hey, this is the Atheist Experience. We're live from Austin, Texas, from the Atheist Community of Austin's Free Thought Library, where there's books. You can even see the books. And I think somebody actually posted a video tour. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, John Iacoletti. Welcome.
Howdy, thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Doing all right. Getting good grades. Future's so bright. You got to wear shades.
Yeah.
It's song lyric week, I'm sure. Hopefully there'll be a caller that will let me dig into some other call lyrics as well. This is a live show out of Austin, Texas, where we interact with callers. You can contact the show via Skype. You'll see right down there. It says Skype, The Atheist Experience, all one word, no spaces. Don't call, but send a message, and you'll talk to the call screener, and then we'll interact and start setting up calls. We got one caller waiting, but you had a story that you wanted to kind of get to.
Yeah, just a little quick thing. We got one of our viewers sent this in. Milton sent this in. It's Dear Abby from last Sunday. Mm-hmm. And, I was just glancing through it, and I thought, this isn't what I would expect Dear Abby to respond. I thought it was kind of cool, actually. Dear Abby's now written by the daughter of the original Dear Abby, who passed away some years ago.
Maybe that's why this isn't what we would have expected.
Yeah, that could be. But anyway, Dear Abby, I am a 16-year-old girl who doesn't believe in God. All my friends are firm believers in Christianity and attend Bible study or help out with other things at their church. My parents and brothers don't believe in God. When I say I'd like to be a Christian, my brothers make fun of me. When they do, it makes me feel ashamed of myself. I want to be a Christian because it would be nice to feel like I belong, and most Christians aren't accepting of atheists, especially other girls my age. They might be polite, but they're distant. It also doesn't help that the boy I like comes from a religious family. What should I do? Signed, Outsider in Alabama. So Abby says, Dear Outsider, I think you should continue being true to the person you really are. Let me point out that if you're feeling isolated now, consider what a fraud you would feel like if you joined a religion and must pray to a deity you don't believe in order to fit in. You should explore what non-sectarian activities are available in your community. If the boy you like cares about you, he will like you even if you aren't religious, and you will have your self-respect. It's not easy feeling different, but sometimes it's worth it.
And I think that's great. I mean, there's probably some subtleties where we may disagree on some fine points or whatever. Yeah. But curiously, we've got a caller. Let's go ahead and cue Mariam up while we're talking about this, because she wants to talk about pretty much the exact same thing.
Oh, wow.
So, if there is a God, he clearly pointed John to that and had Mariam call just in time for us to discuss this. And I've, we've had this kind of question before, should I come out? Should I pretend? It's going to be different in each case as to what the right move is going to be, or the best move is going to be. Are you there, Mariam?
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, I want to say good job outsmarting Brian Brushwood on that scam school math puzzle.
Oh, has that been posted? I didn't
Yeah.
know. Brian's here in Austin, by the way. Now that I can promote stuff, I'll be happy to promote Scam School with my friend Brian Brushwood, social engineering at the bar. And I've done several episodes with him on different things, and of course he has fooled the pants off me. So it was good to have a math kind of puzzle that I could sort through. So I'm glad that was posted.
Anyway, I am a singer, and I've been told several times that my best shot at finding stable careers as church jobs. And of course, I have a problem with that as an atheist. And like, what if I have to, represent the church that I would work at in something um, and have to, fake being a believer for I don't know how long. So I'm not trying to like replace the people I'm close to with a like I just so that makes any sense. But I just want to know, do you know anybody who's been in that position? They don't have to be performers, but just
Yeah.
anybody. I know you've worked with people from the Clergy Project and
Right.
stuff. And do you like what advice would you give, or what advice have you heard from them?
Yeah, we can start by pointing out the Clergy Project. If you do a Google search for it, basically it is an anonymous web forum for clergy members who are non-believers, who are stuck in their position, stuck in the pulpit, stuck in their music ministry, whatever the case may be. I know several members. I've managed to counsel a couple of them on the phone, and I think it's a great project because some of these people get stuck. They have no way out. They have no idea what they're going to do. They don't have a skill set that applies outside of the church, and yet they've got families to take care of. And so there's a lot of discussion there about, should I keep pretending? How long do I keep pretending? How do I find my way out of this? And the good news is that many people do find their way out. I also know some people who work for churches in technical capacities. I'll get emails from atheists who say, I'm a sound engineer, and I've been working for this church or several churches. I set up their sound equipment, and occasionally I'll show up on Sundays or for special events and run it. Some of them are open about the fact that they're non-believers, and some churches are okay with this. I mean, they're bringing you in for a job. You have the expertise that they need, and some of them will probably look at it as a chance to, we should have allow a non-believer to come in and do this because they're going to get to see our passion play and interact with our people, and maybe we'll be able to win them over. And so it may not be a problem.
I didn't even think of that.
I'm a big fan of being honest about who you are, provided you're comfortable with it. I'm also generally opposed to, lying just for the sake of, having a job or keeping a job. But if you don't have an opportunity for a job and you're good at it, I think if I were you, if you're in a position where you can kind of try and test out the field a bit, talk to them and say, I don't share your beliefs, but I'd be, happy to work with you, provided I'm not doing it in a ministerial capacity where I'm expected to, talk to people or share the good news. If you're looking for someone to sing and perform, plus money from the church gets directed to godless heathens. People will email about advertisements on our YouTube videos and stuff, and they'll say, "Oh, how do you get this to stop? They're putting God ads on your YouTube videos," and I'm like, "Let them. By all means, let them, because that money is directed away from they're paying to advertise on our product, essentially."
Nice.
So, but when it comes to kind of what we were talking about with the Dear Abby letter, interacting with friends and family. I'm still an advocate of honesty, but you have to make sure that you're willing to accept all the potential consequences. And I don't want to trivialize the fact that some people lose their family and their social network over this because their family just can't abide hanging out with a non-believer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's different for me than for the people who are coming from religious backgrounds, because I'm coming from a secular background, but I wasn't like raised to be an atheist, but I wasn't raised in any particular. I wasn't raised religiously, so I'm an out and proud atheist. And when somebody asks, I'll always tell them that it would still be. It would just feel dishonest working for a church.
Yeah, and if by all means, if you're doing something that you're not comfortable with, maybe you shouldn't. But I don't know, your situation or what other options you've got.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on what you're doing and what you're comfortable with. I've met a lot of musicians who perform at churches, and they're professionals doing a job. They're playing music. That's not necessarily endorsing the message of the church. Now, if you're singing, then you may be singing lyrics that you don't agree with or find objectionable. So that might be a different threshold there.
Yeah.
You know, as it turns out, really throughout history, artists and musicians have tended to do a lot of work for churches because that's who hired them. And
That's who had the money.
Christianity has been the basis for so much art and stuff, and of course so has like Greek mythology and everything.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're the people who have the money and the power.
Right.
You get to build massive cathedrals and have them painted and pay people to come and sing and write wonderful music. I find it kind of interesting that you might be performing at a church and someone will be convinced that you're a believer because you sing so well and convey the message such that they feel moved by it. And then there's the opportunity to say, no, you know, I don't actually believe this. I'm just singing it.
Acting.
Yeah, acting, yeah. And by the way, I know a bunch of people who do take their talents and do, you know, local theater or, you know, work for jingle companies. But there's weddings will take places in churches all the time. And I know that some of the people who are getting married don't care so much whether or not the person who's singing the secular song that they picked out to sing at their wedding is a believer or not. Not that I'm, you know, you should be a wedding singer, Mariam. What are you thinking?
Yeah. So thanks for your insight. I'm gonna let you get to other callers.
Yeah, we can actually get to Kaleb, whose name is on the screen while you're talking, which was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But all right, thanks, Mariam. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
So you were, you know, kind of raised Unitarian Universalist and stuff.
Right.
There's not as much conflict there. I mean, I was never a big fan of UU things because a lot of it seemed a little too wooey, like they were trying to be something to everybody, and that, you know, made any religious aspect watered down, but also didn't emphasize secular humanism as much and things like that. Were there discussions about people in situations like that, or does it just not really show its head in UU environments?
It doesn't come up too much in UU churches because, like you said, there's kind of a wide variety of people believing different things. And they, you know, I was involved with the choir, and we sang a lot of songs, but the UU hymnal is very secularized, so they change all the kind of, at least the overt God language, they'll change to something a little more generic. And then there's the old joke that, you know, how do you tell it's a Unitarian congregation? No, it's why do Unitarians sing so badly? It's because they're reading ahead to see if they agree with the words. And, you know, there's some beautiful songs, hymns that are Christian hymns, and you don't want to give up the beautiful hymns, so the Unitarian hymnal changes some of the words around to make it a little more universal, and you get to sing the same old songs that people are used to, and hopefully with updated words. So,
by the way, I don't know if we have any. I haven't actually scoured every shelf in the library, but I wouldn't mind having a variety of hymnals from different, specifically a Baptist hymnal, because I'm always amused at the Baptist hymnal, or all the Baptist hymnals I've seen. The last hymn or the last song is 666, and then it goes into a bunch of, you know, call and response things. But the last actual song with music is hymn number 666, which
that's interesting.
Which amuses me. But hey, we got is it Kaleb in Toronto?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi Kaleb.
Hello? Great, awesome. And I'm sorry, I feel like the one I was following along with on the computer might have been a different show. Is this Matt and John who's on right now?
Yes.
Okay, hi guys. Awesome to talk to you. This is actually my first time calling into anything. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you guys for everything that you do.
Oh, thanks.
I've only been watching the show maybe for about 3 or 4 months, but I've probably watched everything that you guys have done for the last 3 or 4 years at least. Cool. And also probably every debate that Matt's done. So I just wanted to say, you know, that stuff has been a big help, and I wanted to thank you a lot for that.
Glad to hear it.
Cool. So I take it you guys have a little bit of an inkling as to the reason that I'm calling today?
They put a note on the call screening thing, married to a hardline Christian, advice on counter-indoctrination for kids.
Yes, that's the main issue that I'm calling about. So I'll try to make it really brief. I've had a bit of an experience with my run-ins with religion that goes back for quite a while. I've actually always been an atheist myself, but even before my current wife, I was dating somebody who actually got converted to being a Jehovah's Witness. And I ended up studying with them for about a year and a half, going to like 3 or 4 meetings a week, just because I cared about this girl and I wanted to figure out what it was all about.
Sure.
Needless to say, I figured out that it was insane. And well, that was the end of that. And then I met my now wife. We've been together about 7 years. And about 2 or 3 years ago, she kind of made a group of friends who happened to be some fundamentalists themselves. And for whatever reason, she just kind of ate it right up. And I mean, like, it's probably like the fastest conversion I've ever seen. She went from kind of not really knowing where she stood on anything to just like being part of the worship group and, attending like multiple Bible studies a week, going to meetings every weekend. And over the last year and a half, it's taken like a really serious turn into like, I guess some of the more delusional types of beliefs, like the young earth creationism and a lot of the like crazy crackpot conspiracy stuff that we see online, these like global satanic control networks and all of this stuff. And I've got a 6-year-old son, he's just turned 6, and a 3-year-old daughter. And this past year, she decided not to even put our son in school. She basically pulled him from school, and she's been doing the homeschooling. And, I don't see what goes on because, every single day because I'm at work. But when I come back, it's just I get these vibes that are just not really good. He's 6 years old already, and he's just out there proselytizing to like every single person that he meets, and invoking like faith healing and stuff. And he's only 6 years old, so it's got me a little worried. Wow. I'm just trying to get some advice on how to deal with this.
How is a 6-year-old invoking faith healing?
Well, he believes he's invoking faith healing. Of course, he's not. but yeah, I mean, so let me see. I come home with a headache, and I say I've got a headache, and he'll come over and he'll lay his hands on me, and he'll try to, get Jesus to heal me by invoking the power of Jesus, and sincerely believing that my headache's going to go away. And if it does go away, he believes it's because Jesus made my headache go away.
What's he believe when it doesn't go away?
Well, so I try to use that. Epistemology to get to the root of that, as whether or not it's a solid foundation for a belief. And I'll ask him questions about that. Like I'll be like, well, how do you know it was Jesus? How do you know my headache didn't just go away because of the Tylenol that I took? And most of the time when I get to those things, he'll just revert to, because mommy said so, because mommy said it was Jesus. And
yeah,
I believe what mommy says, kind of thing.
Yeah. So there's a number of things about this that disturb and even somewhat terrify me.
That makes two of us.
Not the least of which is, if your kid's coming to you saying they believe it because mommy says so, why don't they believe that it's not the case because daddy says so? Now, I'm not saying that they should believe either of you merely on your word, but the fact that they are relying on one and not on the other, and you're in a position where you can't say, well, I can't prove to you that Jesus didn't make my headache go away. I can't prove to you that it was just the Tylenol. I think the most frequent answer I give to people when they start talking about, what do we teach our kids, et cetera, is teach them how to think and not what to think, and encourage a spirit of discovery and inquiry. But you're in a position where and I apologize, based on the information you've given me, there's no way to not be insulting. You have a spouse who is utterly unqualified to educate and is doing that, and you don't know what's going on, except that the results that you see are terrifying in the sense that they are unscientific, they are based on authority, they are not in conjunction with reality.
Yep.
And I'd love to say, in most cases, things get better as kids, get older. They kind of grow out of the utter reliance on authority. You can encourage them to think more skeptically, talk about, how do we know this? How do we know that? It may take some time and things may get better. But if you've got a situation like yours, where they're seemingly being full-on indoctrinated by one parent to ideas that are only shared by one parent, I think you're going to have to pretty much have a sit down with your spouse. And
Trust me. First of all, I want to say thank you. I appreciate your very sincere attempt there to be tactful and not to offend. But yeah, I think I'm right there with you guys as regards to this whole situation. I mean, I see it as abusive. I see it as an abuse of the authority that my wife has as a parent, as as their mother, as being the at-home caregiver, because I'm a sole provider. The fact that she has more time with them and therefore can subject them to more of her own beliefs. I've tried to be extremely respectful in the sense that I don't want to confuse the poor guy. I don't want to outright contradict everything that she says and try to be really militant about it.
And you don't want to create extra conflict where there's a battle between mommy and daddy over what kids are going to believe. The one thing to keep in mind, and I'm sure you've realized this, your wife's not trying to do harm. She's just trying to. She sincerely believes this and feels it's important to teach and share. So it's not that she's intending to be evil or intending to abuse or mislead. She's got the best intentions, and as we know, that's what the road to hell is paved with.
Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly it. So I've tried to have these sit downs, after the kids are in bed and talk to her as I'm your spouse, what I believe, and I appreciate where you're coming from and how your beliefs compel you to do this. But I implore you, can you please at least wait until he's old enough to reason for himself? Don't start this so early. Don't make it so overt and so relentless. Give him some space. The way I try to do it is, because he asked me to pray. He asked why I don't go to church. He frequently asks me why I don't believe in God. And I tell him. Whenever he asks me, I tell him. But I don't do it in a militant way. I don't do it in an aggressive way. I try to just sit back and be very kind of, relaxed and just explain to him why I believe the way I do or don't believe. And, and basically why you should believe anything. And I actually use quotes from you, Matt, where you say the best time to believe in anything is immediately after you have a good reason to do so. And so I do, I've been reading up on a lot of material and trying to find the best way to deal with this. Partly, I was hoping that, as he gets older, he'll be more and more open to having deeper conversations where I can start to present stronger material, things about evolution and epistemology and how to arrive at conclusions and what is sound reasoning and what's not. So I'm partially hoping that we'll get to that point, but I'm just also afraid that when it happens too early, sometimes you can go past the point of no return, or it can be really hard. It can do damage, right? Yeah. Some damage that could last a whole lifetime, and I'm afraid of that. So I'm not quite sure where to go, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that you're doing all the right things. If you and your wife were on the same page, you're right. This should be between you and your wife, and the child shouldn't be put in the middle of it. But you also don't have to just accommodate whatever your wife wants to do. You're a parent just as much as she is. You need to decide together and compromise. And I guess you're the only one who can decide how much room there is for compromise. But if her position is my way or the highway, that I guess I would feel very grim about the future of your relationship and your ability to co-parent.
And I'm thinking, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I can tell you my suspicion right now of what I would do if I found myself in that position. There would definitely be a conversation about compromise, about making sure that if she's going to teach these sorts of things, that we set aside time to teach other things, where we're going out and we're exploring museums and science in the real world and encouraging that. But the big thing is, my problem with homeschooling is that there's no oversight in most cases. Sometimes you can get a really good education homeschooled, and sometimes you can get a really good indoctrination and a terrible education homeschooling. I don't know what curriculum she's actually using, but if I were you, I would get a hold of the standardized tests for the public school year that your kids are in, and only allow continued homeschooling if they continue to perform well on the test, to show that they are at or beyond grade level on the things that they're supposed to. Because if she's skipping real education, math, science, history, English, etc., in favor of the God stuff, that's what weekends are for. You can take them to Sunday school and try to educate the proper learning out of them. But if they were my kids, they'd be taking tests regularly to show that they are on or above grade level of expectations. And the second that they fall behind that, homeschooling is freaking done.
Yeah, and that it's really, you're right there with you. That's what I do. I bring them to the museum on the weekends. Show them the dinosaurs, show them like replicas of the Burgess Shale, and talk about like the origins of humanity, and how we all vertebrates share the same DNA ancestry and these types of things. And although he's still too young to really understand it, I feel like seeing those bones and actually seeing that stuff goes a long way. And I already have the curriculum book for, I'm in Ontario right now, and I got the curriculum, and it's got tests in it, and it's also got follow-on stuff. And I told her, I was like, if you're going to do this, I want to see this book filled out, and I'm going to test him myself on the weekends at the end of each section and make sure that he's passing. And I was actually surprised. On the last test, he had gotten A+ on everything. So
outstanding.
It's not completely failing. It's just that there's this religious delusion stuff that's getting sandwiched in there.
I will retract my former statement that she's unqualified, and say that she may well be qualified to teach the nuts and bolts. But she's definitely teaching some additional content that is suspect. So
yes, exactly.
Well, and like Matt said, you might want to get a hold of tests at the not just the one that's in the book that's the curriculum she's using, because that test could be just as flawed. If there are flaws in the material, the test could be flawed as well. So you may want to check them on a different standard, whichever one the Canadian government or the Ontario government. I'm not sure how your public schools work there.
Yeah, I mean, if she's teaching what's in these particular books that are supposed to be the grade level education, but they're supplied by people who are not keeping up with state standards and not keeping up with good standards, I'd use other tests to see where they are, because one of the things that can happen is I've had relatives that homeschooled who were brilliant. They were, doctors and nurses and well-educated, and also fundamentalist Christians. And they homeschooled right up until about high school, and then they wanted their kids to go to a school where there was interaction with people beyond their siblings. And in order to do that, I don't see any reason why your wife, no matter what she wants to teach, should be opposed to this idea, which is, let's make sure that the kids are on target, so that if we want to reintroduce them to public school for other reasons, we can. If we want to introduce them to a private school, they can get accepted. When it's time for them to go on to college, they don't have problems of, oh, you were homeschooled, and now you know this chunk of what you're supposed to know, but not this chunk over here. It's, this is both of your responsibilities to make sure that your kids are educated. And I think you've demonstrated that you have the right goals, that you're working toward this stuff. It's probably just going to take some time, but also some conversations about compromise, about how much religious indoctrination is too much. I mean, why would God be bothered by cutting back a bit and allowing them to discover this on their own, rather than spoon feeding them whatever it is that mom happens to believe? Because I think I would have acknowledged when I was a believer that I could be wrong, because I disagree with other believers. So there might be some other version of Christianity that could be more correct than what my current beliefs are. That's why they go to church. That's why they interact and have teaching. And if she's going to raise little kids, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, to just believe what she believes, she could be mistaken. And so, branch out beyond just what mommy thinks. Teach them other religions. I'm a huge fan of comparative religions courses. I've said for years I don't think they should be electives. I think they should be mandatory in public schools because I remember taking a comparative religions course and being confused at how everybody else could believe such crazy stuff and yet my beliefs weren't crazy. How could all the rest of them get it wrong? And it's because I was thoroughly indoctrinated. Looking back on it years later, I have a completely different take on that. And I saw people who have, and I see them every day, who only know the little pocket of religion that they've been taught since they were kids. They don't know anything about anybody else. It's the reason why people are fearful of anybody who's Muslim, whether they should be or not. We're xenophobic. And I think that the more we know about world religions, and this is going to be terrifying to some believers, the less reasonable our own beliefs seem, and the more likely we are to be. It's one of the things that I think you churches got partially right, is by getting people to see how other people believe. You are less in love with your own ideas unless they really have good evidence behind them.
Yeah, that's always one of my favorite sort of tactics, is the fact that, there have been thousands of religions throughout history, and even religious people are atheists about all of them except one.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really strong point.
What a coincidence that you just happen to be raised in the correct one.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so did everybody else, by the way. But anyway, Caleb, I hope things work out well. Keep doing what you're doing. By all means, contact us again. Let us know how things are going.
Yeah, for sure.
And don't panic, I guess, is the big thing. You don't need to be looking for a fight, and you don't need to necessarily think that this is the end of the world, because there's a lot of time to correct, and you may have your perception of what's going on may be as skewed as anybody else's. So, just keep caring for your kids, keep encouraging them, and make sure that they're meeting their requirements, and you've got an eye on the long-term goal, which is making sure they get out in society with knowledge and skill sets that are going to serve them well.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, guys. That's been very helpful, and I appreciate everything.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thanks. Take care.
We'll get Jennifer queued up, but it's. By the way, my wife recommended that everybody go take sex ed at a UU church.
Yeah, they have a good program, and the ones in the schools are so bad that your kids really need something more comprehensive, and especially down here. Now, there's some good programs up in the Northwest and some other states, but down in Texas particularly, I think they do more harm than good.
Yeah, there's a lot of abstinence-only education stuff. And what was it? The statistics on this are going to be old because I haven't had to reference this in a few years. But Lubbock, Texas, where they had abstinence-only education and absolutely nothing to do except to go out on the weekend and try to hook up, had like the highest rates of teen pregnancy and STDs. Right. You can, as a parent, really care and love your kid and still do massive damage if you have bad ideas. The parents that were recently sentenced for their child was sick, but they didn't take him to the hospital. They just prayed, and eventually their kid died, and they ended up getting sentenced. My friend J.T. Eberhard just pointed out many times, those parents didn't love their kid any less than anybody else is. They just had bad ideas about how the way the world worked. Right. And if you have those bad ideas and you act upon them, it doesn't mean that you are an evil monster trying to harm your kid. It just means that you're wrong, and dangerously wrong. And if anything, that's where we need to correct. Yes, abstinence works. Abstinence-only education does not work because we're weak, because people aren't going to stay abstinent. It's beyond absurd to think that teaching kids to just, hey, don't take your pants off, is going to convince them to actually not have sex.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Neither do the purity rings.
They need the information as well as everything else to know how to protect themselves.
It's a lot of this, gets played up as sort of, oh well, this is God's going to punish you, and it's very clear that even amongst fundamentalist Christians, who sincerely believe that God doesn't want them to have sex until they're married, that this does not stop them. It didn't stop me. It didn't stop many other people in my family. It didn't stop most of the kids in my church. It didn't stop anybody that I really knew, except for a couple of people who were dead set, no sex, no sex, no sex, no sex. And what they did was they had no life, no life, no life in order to avoid that. And there's much better ways of teaching. But let's get on to Jennifer in Houston. Thanks for waiting.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good.
What'd you have for us?
I'm sorry, there's a bit of an echo on my end, but I do have my stream off.
Cool.
But I wanted to talk about my mother. I'm really lucky that my whole household are atheists. My extended family aren't, but my mother is an atheist. My sister is too, even though she goes to a Catholic church, Catholic school. But what I wanted to talk about is my mother doesn't believe in science. And it's a really weird thing because I'm trying not to get into the political stuff because I know you guys don't do that. But she doesn't believe in climate change.
So, okay, when you say she doesn't believe in science, is it just specific things, or does she like reject science on the whole? Because she goes and sees a doctor, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah. It's specific things that go along with her political views.
Right.
But the political views are usually backed by solely religious things.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
No, this is not at all unusual.
yeah.
People don't generally understand science. As soon as they get some misinformation about it, one of the most common attacks on science is that, well, science used to say this and now it says this, so I can't rely on it. And I think the best response to that is that, first of all, science doesn't say this or this. It's scientists who make pronouncements based on their methods. And yes, it's true that in the past, scientists, using good scientific methods, have come to conclusions which we now know are wrong. How did we find out that those conclusions were wrong? We didn't find out they were wrong because of religion or political ideas. We found out they were wrong because people used more science. The only thing that's ever disproved science is science, or the finding of scientists is more findings. But going back to like David Hume, where he says the wise person apportions their belief to the evidence, if you're letting your political ideologies get in the way of the actual science, it's like on climate change. The verdict is in. Now, you can have all kinds of debates about whether or not it's anthropogenic, whether or not humans have much to do with it.
To what degree?
Yeah, and what, if anything, we can actually do about it. But, and whether or not it's permanent, whether or not, we could be looking at something cyclical. Even if you know absolutely nothing about this, the fact that this is happening is now completely undeniable. And the people who are saying, no, this isn't happening, either mean that they think it's going to fix itself or whatever. You can just look at pictures of the polar ice caps. You can look at the actual data. And the bulk of the scientific community and every major scientific organization has come out and said, yep, it's real.
And I've told her all this, and I've tried to explain it, and she knows. And it's so strange because she works with plants, and she's worked with plants for 20-something years. And so she knows that where the plants now can live has changed, but she just... no matter what I say to her, it goes back to, well, oh, you're a liberal, you've been brainwashed, blah, 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 blah. And
So find her some non-liberals.
It doesn't even matter what I show her. She is convinced it is a giant conspiracy.
What has convinced her that this...
Really right-wing conservative talking points that are really old.
People who aren't scientists have convinced her that
Yes.
the science is wrong.
So does she think, now I can understand somebody, because we're stuck. We're stuck picking out which sources we're willing to accept. I mean, this is inevitable. And so she's decided that she's going to rely on some sources that you think she shouldn't, and I would probably agree with you. But so I can see how somebody can get there. But if they just stay there and are unwilling to look at new evidence, then the question to ask them is, why are you unwilling to look at this, and why are you rejecting this evidence? Because do you think that there's a conspiracy among scientists to support some sort of liberal agenda? Because that's not the way science works. The first person who comes along who says, hey, all of these climate scientists got it wrong, here's the data for this, they get a Nobel Prize, it gets written out, this is the way that things work. Science thrives on overturning established ideas within science.
And she believes that exactly for everything else except for these few really radical views, which are pretty much solely politically based. And it's not like I haven't said, oh, why don't you look at the other stuff? I've tried to show her. I've tried to show her from NASA. I've tried to show great scientists talking about it in depth. And her response is, well, why haven't you listened to the other side? And she'll show me stuff
Sure.
from and I'll read it. And I'm just like, well, I can show you why all this is wrong. And she's like, well, I don't trust this source or that source or this source, even though they're reliable sources.
So I'm gonna ask you something that's gonna lead to something that none of us are gonna like, but it's reality. Does it matter what your mom believes? Is she gonna change the world?
Oh no, it doesn't. But the thing is we get along really well until she starts going down the, oh, have you seen this article road?
Yeah.
And we live together, and so it's really frustrating, and
Yeah.
it really is putting a strain on our relationship more than it should.
Yeah.
Like, it makes
get it.
no sense for political things to make us this upset with each other.
I have relatives who will post memes on the internet that are just like batshit crazy memes that are, where Snopes has debunked this, and there's countless sites, oh, this is what's happening with Halloween candy or whatever else. And they're unwilling to accept any sort of correction or any information that contradicts it. The one thing, I care about what people believe, but if it's clear that I'm not going to be able to change somebody's mind, then I've kind of got to let that go. And so, like with my mom, we don't discuss religious stuff anymore because it just gets in the way of actually having a relationship. And we both found ways to have conversations that don't go there. I don't know of any other solution.
Oh, sorry.
No, I don't know any other way to deal with it.
Okay.
Because it may take somebody else or some other information, or it may take, right-wing sources that are starting to, come on board to actually change your mind. I don't know.
Okay, because I've told her before, like, I don't want to talk anything political with you because we just end up in a fight, and it's only her I have this problem with. Normally I'm level-headed, cool, but with her it's very explosive.
Yeah, it's because you
But
care.
Yeah, and she keeps bringing it up, and I'm just like, I don't want to freaking talk about this, Mom.
Yeah, at some point you have to choose your battles and just say, I'm not going there.
Okay.
Kind of nod and smile politely and change the subject. Because I always say you can't reason somebody into a position that wasn't arrived at through reason. And this is one of those cases, I think, where she's got her mind made up, and it doesn't matter what you show her.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Now I'm really, I guess, bad in the sense that I hate giving up on people. Don't get me wrong, there are people on Twitter that I'm happy to block just because they demonstrate incredible stupidity and hatred and stuff that I just don't need in my life. Yes, I could probably have a conversation with them and convince them, why they're wrong or why what they did was terrible or, why they could have perhaps taken a different route. But I have more important things to do with my time than try to fix everybody everywhere. And so what I'll end up doing is just kind of blocking someone. You can't do that. But what you can do is if you really want to make your best shot at this, find out something she believes that is based on the same or similar information from the same or similar sources. Because that way you can expose that, oh, she's willing to accept this source and this data provided it agrees with her preconception, but rejects the same thing when it disagrees. So instead of focusing on some of the specifics about climate change that she might reject, if the data that they're using points to other things, like the likelihood that you're going to have a better or worse winter where you live, or that winter is starting later, and she can observe this and see it and accept it. You can say, Mom, this is based on the same data that you reject, with regard to climate change. That's about as good as I can probably get, but it's going to take some work.
Yeah, it's going to take more, but thank you. And I know even if I said that, she would go, "Oh, well, the climate changes all the time." It's just crazy.
Weather.
But,
So she might
thank
be
you.
confusing climate and weather. Weather changes all the time.
Yeah.
But-
And I've tried to explain. She just it doesn't
Just for my own amusement,
thank you so much.
is she the type of person that's likely to say on a cold day, "Oh yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
So much for global
so much
warming.
for global warming"?
Yep.
Yeah. Then I think probably you could have a conversation about the difference between weather and climate. And there's some good videos on YouTube that actually discuss the difference between weather and climate and how that sort of single data point anecdotal thing is absolute garbage. And I would imagine she would shrug it off as well. I wasn't being serious. I wasn't saying that just because it was cold today completely disproves it, but I don't know. I do wish you luck, and like John said, you kind of figure out how to pick your battles. But if you're going to do it, it might take a lot of work. You got to figure out whether or not you want to do all that work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Jennifer's from Houston, and I think so. This week I'm doing a debate Wednesday in just outside of Nashville with John Ferrer on whether or not a God exists. Then next weekend I'll be at the Florida Humanist Association Free Flow convention. And then I come home, and then on the 14th, I think it is, I'll double check and you post it on Facebook, I'll be in Houston to do a debate on whether or not there's a soul. So that's the debate that I'm most looking forward to, and it'll be the final debate of the year, and then I'll start planning next year. So maybe we'll see Jennifer in Houston.
You're a busy guy.
It's just starting to tone down a little bit, but yeah, it's been an incredibly busy year. I don't know, which one you want to take?
I haven't actually read them through.
Let's go ahead and get Zephram on too there in Frisco. But yeah, so it's been a really busy year, starting basically early March when I went to Australia for 20 days, and it's been going and going. I noticed my email inbox had 7,100 and some odd unread emails, and that was after replying to many in a week. So
I don't know how you keep up.
I don't. Clearly.
I get most of the ones that come to the show, and I can't keep up with that. So
Yeah.
I imagine you get probably 10 times as much.
I'll archive those, and anything that was really important comes back. Luckily, there were very few times this year where something actually slipped through the cracks, and I was able to do quite a few debates, a number of talks, but mostly I was able to go out to different groups and kind of meet people, encourage individuals to participate and volunteer with their local organizations, and to be out, to be outspoken to the extent that they're comfortable with it, because the more people that who are atheists or who have beliefs that are different from yours, the less fearful you are. When they find out the neighbor down at the end of the street who you've talked to about lawnmowers or whatever is a godless heathen, that changes your perception of both atheists and that neighbor, and hopefully in a more positive sense. But
Yeah, people are always glad. It's like, you too? Oh, I thought I was the only one.
that has happened more times than I can count. But Zephram, thanks for waiting. How you doing?
Hello, good. You?
Pretty good.
Thanks for letting me call in. Can I ask my question?
Sure.
I have a friend that I debate with every now and then, just kind of in the hallways and talking informally, And every time I do, and I talk about what would convince him, he brings up that anything he believes, or that he believes all evidence will only point towards the existence of God and the truth of his particular sect of Christianity. And I don't know how to respond to that because he
So he's basically saying that there is no evidence that he thinks could possibly contradict his beliefs?
Yes. And every
Then you're
time I
wasting
try to
your time.
bring something up that discredits that belief, he will ignore it.
Yeah, then you're wasting your time attacking the belief directly. Instead, if you hope to have any conversation, you'll have to talk about the nature of evidence and why it is that he thinks every possible piece of evidence would support his. Because when they get to the point where they are able to take anything you say and twist it so that it supports their belief, even if it very clearly contradicts it, you then have to have separate conversations. You got to pull their doctrine entirely out of it and talk about, okay, setting aside your religion, what would it take you to convince you that some other thing was true or that this was not true? And if worse comes to worse, you can ask questions like, okay, if you ran into somebody who was, let's say, a Muslim, and they did what you did, and they said, every piece of evidence possible would only confirm my belief, how would you react to that? You know, if they would told you that they think that every possible piece of evidence only confirms their beliefs in Allah and Islam, what would your response be to that? How would you view them?
And I think I brought something up like that, similar to I think it was a conversation on whether or not you should be afraid of going to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that to a Muslim, the concept that it's your fault if you go to hell is rational to them, and he believes that it is universally rational from the other perspective as well as from his.
Oh, so all religions are right?
No, but that all religions can say it's your fault if you're going to hell, even though only one of them could be right.
No, but they're not only talking about going to hell, they're talking about what one must do to avoid hell as well. And they're talking about the very character and nature of a God being, and they don't agree.
Exactly. And they all have different takes on it, but each one says, this is how you get to hell, and if you don't understand that, then you obviously are mistaken. And it's very, very clear, because you just have to read the Bible or the Quran.
So how does he distinguish then what he believes from what they believe?
What's in the Bible and what's not? I mean, it's just a matter of he's a Christian.
Even if he just points to the Bible, he does realize that there's over 1,000 denominations of Christianity that all point to the Bible and all disagree on every point of doctrine, including the process of salvation and what's going to happen. There are people who believe in a literal hell. There are people who believe in annihilation, and they can all point to verses that support their beliefs. Even if we were to concede that a God exists and that it is something remotely in the realm of the biblical God, how does he, determine that his beliefs on that God are correct and somebody else's aren't?
All right, thanks. I'll bring that up in conversation with him next time.
Now, he's likely to say that it's from revelation from God, that he gets his information directly from the Holy Spirit. And when he points that out, ask him, don't you think those other people who you think are wrong would say exactly the same thing? And so if that's the case, then there is no outsider test to tell which of you is right at all. Everybody is just running around saying, I'm right, I cannot be wrong because God has revealed it to me. And that's exactly how we get to over 1,000 denominations that claim the same book and label and yet disagree on the specifics.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I ask one more thing?
Absolutely.
Last week, I think you did a debate in Canada, and I don't know where the other one was, right?
Yeah, one of them was in Red Deer in Alberta, and the other debate was in San Diego.
Okay, thanks. Well, one of them, you brought up MRI scans on the brain, and you said something about one place. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I believe I brought that up in Red Deer. I'll be bringing it up a lot more on the 14th in Houston.
Can you talk about that, and can you post the source of it on the website?
After the
that would
debate,
be really useful.
After the debate about the existence of a soul in Houston, at some point, not only will I post the debate, but I'll also post a debate review where I go through the details of what I presented, and then I'll put source material in that. So it'll be on my YouTube channel, which you can get youtube.com/sansdeity or patreon.com/atheistdebates.
Okay, thank you.
But it'll be a little while. I probably we're talking January before all that gets posted.
All right.
Thanks,
Well,
Zephram.
thanks for having me call in.
Sure.
Thanks, Zephram. What about the guy who weighed the person right at the moment before death And then the moment after death.
Yeah, the 7 or 8 grams or so. Yeah, we'll be talking about that
You're
for
going to
sure.
address
too.
that? Okay, cool.
All right, so we got like 5 minutes or so left, but we might go a little over. We'll go get Jamar and Buffalo queued up. Yeah, the MRI scans, there's a number of different studies that have been done, and I couldn't possibly, cite references here because I don't have my notes, but there's a study that showed when you ask someone, what do you think, there's a portion of your brain which relates to what the self thinks. And when you say, what does John think, there's a portion that relates to some other being other than the self and what they think. And when you asked him, what does God think, the side for self is what was active.
Interesting.
And, there are believers who would say, well, that's because, God is in tune with you and not another. You are one with God. But it's all, post hoc rationalizations. When the reality is this works independent of what somebody's religious beliefs are. And it seems that the more reasonable explanation is that God is something, when you ask, what does God think? You are imagining, you are putting yourself in that position. So it's no surprise that God tends to agree with everybody who believes in him and how they end up in
Yeah, it's funny how that
conflict.
works.
Yeah, my God and I, we're like one mind. I completely agree. And I think the evidence supports that you and your God are of one mind, and it's your mind, and no evidence for any external mind that you're actually appealing to.
Have they tried doing an MRI on an atheist and asked them, what does God think? What?
I don't know if that was in that study or not. I know they've done the God module testing and stuff, and some people have a more heightened sense of the supernatural and things like that. I don't know, because if you asked me as an atheist, what does God think? I'm not going to have any reference. I don't think there's a God. It would be like, what does Voldemort think? Actually, I would probably give a better answer for Voldemort. It would probably come from the other side because I could reference it. So, yeah, I don't know. Jamar in Buffalo, thanks for waiting.
Hey, thanks. So I listen to your show a lot, and I always hear you talk about how morality is objective, how you can just objectively say something is wrong. But I don't see how that, for a while I believed that, but I'm starting to doubt that a lot. Like, how can you objectively say something is wrong?
Sure. So the objectiveness is about evaluating an act or the consequences of an action with respect to a goal. You could say that the goals are not objective, that they're subjective, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. Because if morality is going to mean anything, it has to relate to, as Sam Harris would say, well-being, or as I would say, something akin to well-being. It does no good to say, oh, morality is whatever I think it is or whatever my society thinks it is, because now you've defined it in a way that it could be anything. And so what I think that we tend to be talking about when we talk about right and wrong and whether something's moral or immoral is we're using linguistic shortcuts when the question we're really asking is, does this benefit us individually and as a species, or does this do harm for us? Does this increase our existence and our happiness and thriving and our general well-being, or does it diminish those things? If you look at the things that people specifically say, oh, this is moral or this is immoral, they're always about that.
Okay, but in some cases, like, you can think of anything, not anything, but you can think of a few cases where that can...
Yeah, but see, okay, here's the point of confusion. I apologize for interrupting you, but we're running short on time. As soon as you say in some cases, now we're talking about something different, because I am absolutely a proponent of situational morality, that every situation is different. When I talk about objective morality, I'm not saying there is a universal objective moral absolute that applies to every single situation. I'm saying within a given situation, there's a finite set of possible actions, and there's some set of one or more actions that represent the moral pinnacle for that situation, and some set that represents, moral or immorality. So, like, if you and I are sitting here having a conversation, It could be viewed as immoral for me to interrupt you, even if it's for clarification because we're short of time. It would definitely be immoral if I were just to scream a bunch of offensive, nasty things at you, and it would be more moral for me to, value you as a person, have a conversation, and try to get to some understanding. All you need for moral evaluations is to be able to compare the consequences of an action in a situation with other actions, hypotheticals. And because we're physical beings in a physical universe that has laws, there is no physical law that says if I chop off John's head, that's good for him. In every situation that we can conceive of, barring some, or virtually every situation, I'll say, cutting off John's head is not good for him.
I would agree.
So like in so how if your standard is it's harmful to society or harmful to a person or whatever,
Yeah.
then how is like something, not saying I agree with it, but just for sake of argument, having consensual sex with children, like say a 13-year-old and a 25-year-old decide to hook up and it's consensual, how is that immoral?
Yeah, so the thing is that 13-year-old can't actually give consent because consent is a product of being adequately informed and comprehending the consequences of the action. And so generally we would view 13-year-olds, and we can go longer. Where we draw the line is somewhat arbitrary, and we may not be doing it correctly. But just to say that you got consent, not all consent is equal. Simply getting someone to say yes to something doesn't mean that they have been adequately informed and were capable of reasonably giving consent. So, I mean, that's where that kind of scenario falls apart.
Okay, let's raise the age a little bit. Let's say you were 16 or 17, and the person was 25 that they're having sex with.
Yeah.
Still?
Well, it depends. So this is another thing where there's a situation there. I think it's entirely possible that a 16 or 17-year-old could give informed consent to have sex with someone who is over 18. And I don't really think that the ages make a lot of difference, but there are extenuating circumstances where the nature of the relationship beforehand could have an impact on this. For example, if you're in a parent or custodial role and you have essentially trained them and raised them and brainwashed them to give consent to something they might not otherwise, that could be immoral. So you have to consider all of the factors in there. When we're talking about age of consent, there's obviously considerable disagreement, and it's changed over time. But
there's cases where it could be immoral even if they're both adults.
Yeah.
A lot of cases. So it's, we have to draw the line somewhere legally, but it's more circumstantial than
here's
that.
two 35-year-olds who are out and you got consent. Did you get consent? I mean, what are the situations? Can someone who's intoxicated actually be considered to give consent? Are they in their right mind? Are they able to make reasonable decisions? Probably not in most cases, depending on how, we're not just going to say, oh, somebody had a drink, so now they're incapable of reason.
Right.
But we know of situations where you can get air quotes consent, just in case you're not watching, which is not the same thing as consent. So that's why the laws that we have we don't just legislate on the basis of morality, but when we do, they're a lot more complex and muddier than just simplistic things, which is why I was advocating for situational morality. We went back to, is there an absolute with regard to, consent? And the answer is no, not a universal absolute.
So I know you don't have a lot of time left, but just really quick, I've been listening to a lot of Sam Harris, and he's been talking about determinism, and it's starting to change my worldview a lot. So, and I've had a hard time squaring determinism with morality.
So normally the drawback for determinism for most people is what they think about free will. I would recommend reading Dan Dennett, and he's actually written a response to Sam Harris's article on free will, pointing out that Sam is essentially a determinist and he doesn't know it, a compatibilist and doesn't know it. But Dan has a really good book called Elbow Room, The Varieties of Free Will Worth Wanting. There are also plenty of people who don't think that you have free will. And Sam is in a position where he rejects all notions of free will and yet doesn't have a problem with considering moral questions, even in the absence of free will. Because at the end of the day, if I don't have any free will, and I don't think we have libertarian free will, and I'm generally a compatibilist, which is kind of a redefinition of free will. But John and I are sitting here, and let's say neither one of us have free will, and John decides to cut off my head. We'll flip the script so that I'm not always cutting off John's head. And neither one of us has free will. How does that change at all how we view that situation? We can say, oh, John wasn't responsible, but he was. This meat sack here, whether it was predetermined or whether it was an act of volition, still killed another meat sack, which is something we actually care about. And so we're going to hold him accountable. So at the end of the day, whether or not we have free will doesn't change how we're going to view and act with regard to moral dilemmas.
Yeah, and Sam Harris, he went into depth about that, and I don't know, something about it just doesn't make, not that it doesn't make sense, but I guess I'm just so used to viewing the world in a certain way. When I'm presented with that, I'm like, what? I'm not used to hearing this.
It's
so just
strange stuff. It's strange stuff when you live in a world where the bulk of people believe that not only do they have free will, but they probably have libertarian free will, and they've been educated on morals and educated on dealing with these situations from an entirely religious perspective, a culture that has been soaked and steeped with religious traditions that don't actually map to reality. So there's a lot of thinking to do, but the things to ask yourself, if in fact you don't have free will, how does that change your life?
I guess it wouldn't really just really drastically change the way I view the world, I guess.
Yeah. I think the biggest fear people have is that, oh no, if people find out that they don't have free will, then there'll be mass chaos. That free will is an illusion that we need to keep. And I don't think that that's the case for free will or for anything.
Yeah.
To the extent that there's something useful about viewing the world with respect to free will, I think that still makes sense and exists whether we have it or not. Because there's a difference. I think you and I and everybody would agree that there's a difference between me standing up and walking outside of my own volition, whether it's free will or not, and John dragging me outside. And the difference between those two things is what we're addressing, whether anybody has anything called or like free will or not.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just a weird thing to think about when you're used to, I'm not religious, but I'm used to the religious idea of, I shouldn't say religious idea, but this idea of
it's traditional.
Free will. We just, everything we do is by our own choice. We kill someone, it's because we chose to do it. That's what our legal system is based off of, the notion that we make our own choices, not that we were predisposed to kill or rape someone.
But you could change it. You could change the way you think about it without changing anything else, which is this: I am a thinking agent, whether or not all my actions are predetermined or not. I am this meat sack doing actions. It doesn't matter whether or not that was predetermined. The difference, which is why I use that example of walking out versus being dragged out, is whether or not what you would have done is violated by some coercion or action by other thinking agents. Now, there's a lot of really good things that Sam goes into with regard to if we find out that there's a brain defect, that makes somebody, and then you get rid of the brain tumor. I would argue that is now a different person, just like I'm a different person now than I was when I was 10. I had a conversation with somebody the other day about statute of limitations. For some crimes, it's like 7 years. And the thought was, why should we have a statute of limitations? Why not, if we found out you stole that thing, why shouldn't we be able to prosecute you forever? I think one of the things is that we have limited resources, so how many crimes are we going to go after? But the other is, I did things when I was in my teens and 20s that I should have gone to jail for had I been caught. And the recognition that I'm a different person now, And the fear of that consequence is what has kept me from, I have never repeated those acts at all and wouldn't, and discourage other people. So if I was now subjected to going to jail for whatever I did back then, what good does that serve anybody? It doesn't serve anybody anything. I should still be able to perhaps make restitution for things that I've done. But as far as, criminal code and violations, there's reasons. We recognize that we change as people. And if you have got somebody who's a serial offender who isn't changing, who is continuing to do the things, well then, they're going to end up in jail eventually. Hopefully. But
I think that analogy falls apart in certain areas. Because I know the statute of limitations, at least in some states, for like rape is like really short, like maybe 6 years, something like that.
So the length of time is based in part upon the severity of the incident and the tenacity of evidence. So, for example, murder doesn't have a statute of limitations.
Right.
You find the body, boom, you killed somebody. You're gonna, and that's not what I did, by the way. So I'm not everything that I did.
You didn't find the body?
Yeah, no, everything that I've done.
You didn't chop somebody's head off, for example.
Anyway, Jamar, I appreciate the call. Thanks so much. We're going to let you go, and we're going to cut out of here. As a reminder, everybody involved in this, or most of the people involved in the show, are going to go to Threadgills. They had the address up at the bottom of the screen a minute ago. It's the one on Lamar, the older one, around the corner from this. I'll be traveling for the next couple weeks. Russell will be in-house. I don't know. Do you have anything to add before we close out?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Thanks to all the callers and for people who hung on. And yes, as a reminder, we are working on telephony solutions that will allow us to put a phone number up and get more theist calls back in, because we're aware that we've had fewer. Just be patient. Every time we've switched studios and switched numbers or anything else, there's been a period of time where there's a lull with theist callers. But you can also help out by finding theists and pastors and whoever you want, giving them information about the show, how to contact the show, when it's on. They've got time. We're on at like 4:30. They've got their Sunday morning sermons, and then they've got a couple hours before they start the Sunday evening stuff. Surely they can give us a call and explain to us why they believe, why they think other people should believe, and why we're just wrong. But we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.